Welcome to our new video. Today we present another episode in the Linguistics series.
You might be surprised to learn that how we understand language has changed a lot throughout history. It's like we've been wearing different glasses, each giving us a unique perspective on the same view. Today, we're going to journey through the major schools of linguistic thought. Using these academic texts and excerpts you've shared to guide us. Think of it as a crash course in how humans have tried to decipher this incredible code we call language.
And it's not just about names and dates. What's fascinating is how each school asks different questions about language, leading to entirely new ways of thinking about how it works and what it means to know a language.
Exactly. Our mission is to unpack those questions and uncover the key insights each school offered. We'll see how they built on, challenged, and sometimes even completely contradicted each other. Why should you care? Because language is the operating system for our minds. Understanding linguistics helps us understand ourselves better.
That's right. It's like learning about the history of computers to better understand how the one you're using right now actually functions.
Love that analogy. Let's rewind the clock back to the 19th century. This is where we meet the historicists, who were, as you might guess, obsessed with language as history. They were driven by a simple but powerful question. Why are languages the way they are?
And their answer was to look back in time, tracing the evolution of languages like archaeologists, digging through layers of ancient civilizations. They were reacting against earlier philosophical approaches that tried to understand language through pure logic, almost like trying to invent a language from scratch without looking at how real languages actually worked.
So instead of relying on abstract theories, they were getting their hands dirty, comparing different languages, studying ancient texts, and tracing the roots of words and grammatical structures. It's like they were piecing together a giant family tree of languages, showing how they branched off and evolved over centuries.
Exactly. We have Hermann Paul's Principles of Language History, which was a groundbreaking work that laid out a systematic approach to studying language change. And then there's Otto Jespersen, who went so far as to say that language is inherently historical, meaning that you can't truly understand a language without understanding its past.
So it's like saying you can't fully appreciate a modern painting without knowing the history of art movements that led up to it. You need that context, that historical perspective, to really grasp its significance.
Precisely. But the historicists' focus on language change over time led to a new question. What about the structure of language at a specific moment in time? How do we make sense of that intricate web of relationships between sounds and grammar that allows us to communicate?
That's where structuralism comes in, right?
Exactly.
It's like they took a snapshot of language frozen in time and tried to analyze its inner workings.
Exactly. And the rock star of structuralism is Ferdinand de Saussure, often hailed as the father of modern linguistics. His work was a game changer. He argued that language is a system of signs, where the meaning of each sign comes not from some inherent connection to the real world, but from its relationship to other signs within the system.
That sounds a bit abstract.
Can
you give us an example of how that works in practice?
Absolutely. Think about the English word sheep and the French word mouton. They both refer to the same fluffy animal, right? But in English, we have a separate word, mutton, for the cooked meat, while the French just use mouton for both.
So the meaning of mouton shifts depending on whether we're talking about the animal on the farm or the dish on our plate.
Precisely. The meaning isn't inherent in the word itself, but arises from its relationships within the system. It's like a game of chess, where the value of each piece depends on its position on the board and its relationship to other pieces.
I like that analogy.
So
Saussure shifted our focus from the historical evolution of language to its internal structure, its inner logic. He was less interested in where language came from and more interested in how it works as a system at a given point in time.
Exactly. And he introduced a bunch of key concepts, like the famous distinction between lang and parole. Lang is the abstract system of rules and conventions that govern a language, like the grammar book, while parole is the actual use of language in real-life situations, like a conversation.
So lang is like the blueprint and parole is the building.
That's a great way to put it.
Awesome.
Saussure also distinguished between synchrony, the study of language at a particular moment in time, and diachrony, the study of language change over time. He argued that to truly understand the structure of a language, we need to focus on synchrony, on how the system works at a specific moment. Right. Almost like taking a freeze frame.
I see.
Yeah.
It sounds like Saussure was trying to bring a more scientific rigor to the study of language, moving away from the historical focus and towards a more systematic, analytical approach.
Exactly. Yeah. His ideas were incredibly influential, sparking a whole movement of structuralist thought that spread throughout Europe and beyond.
But didn't you say there were different flavors of structuralism?
Yeah.
What happened to Saussure's legacy? Did everyone just agree with him and move on?
Not quite.
Okay.
Saussure's ideas were like a seed that grew into a diverse forest of linguistic thought. His followers took his basic principles and applied them in different ways, leading to the emergence of distinct schools of structuralism, each with its own emphasis and approach.
So it's like Saussure provided the foundation and then others built upon it, creating different wings of the structuralist mansion. Tell me more about these different schools. What made them unique?
Well, right in Saussure's backyard, we have the Geneva School, which developed a more psychologically oriented approach to structuralism. They were interested in how language reflects not just objective meaning, but also the speaker's emotions, intentions, and even their personality.
So they were looking at the subjective side of language, how it's used to express feelings and create a certain style or tone.
Exactly. One of the key figures in the Geneva School was Charles Bally, who developed a theory of stylistics, exploring how language can be used to create different effects on the listener. He argued that language isn't just about conveying information. It's also about conveying attitudes, emotions, and even subtle social cues.
It's like saying that the way you say something can be just as important as what you say. The tone of voice, the choice of words, the rhythm and emphasis. All of these elements contribute to the overall meaning of a message.
Precisely. And this focus on the expressive power of language was a significant contribution of the Geneva School. They showed that language isn't just a neutral tool for communication. It's also a powerful instrument for shaping how we perceive and interact with the world around us.
So the Geneva School added a layer of psychological depth to Saussure's structuralism, showing how language is intertwined with our thoughts, emotions, and social identities. What about the other schools? What were they focused on?
Well, another influential group was the Prague School, which emerged in Czechoslovakia. They took a more functional approach to structuralism, emphasizing how language is used for communication, for achieving specific goals in real-world situations.
So they were less interested in the abstract structure of language and more interested in how it's actually used to do things, to convey messages, to influence people, to build relationships.
Exactly.
So I see.
One of their key contributions was the concept of functional sentence perspective, which explores how the order of words in a sentence can be used to highlight different parts of the message, to create emphasis or contrast, or to guide the listener's attention.
Can you give us an example of how that works?
Absolutely. Let's take a simple sentence like, John went to the store this morning. Now, depending on what we want to emphasize, we can rearrange the words. If we want to emphasize that it was John who went to the store, we can say, it was John who went to the store this morning.
Or if we want to emphasize when he went to the store, we could say, this morning John went to the store.
Exactly.
Right?
The basic information is the same, but the emphasis shifts depending on the word order. The Prague School argued that these choices aren't arbitrary. They reflect the speaker's communicative intentions, what they want to highlight or downplay.
So they were looking at language as a strategic tool, a way of shaping the listener's understanding and response.
Yes.
That's fascinating.
And they also made significant contributions to the study of phonology, the sound system of language. They were interested in how sounds are used to distinguish meaning,
Right.
and how they contribute to the overall structure of a language.
So they weren't just interested in sounds as isolated units. They were looking at how they function within the system.
Yes.
How they work together to create meaning and convey information.
Precisely.
Okay.
And they introduced the concept of distinctive features,
Okay.
which are the basic building blocks of sound that allow us to distinguish one sound from another.
Right.
For example, the feature voicing distinguishes between sounds like P and B,
Okay.
where the vocal cords vibrate for B, but not for P.
It's like they were breaking down sounds into their smallest components.
Yeah.
Like a chemist analyzing the elements in a compound.
Exactly.
Cool.
And this approach had a major impact on the field of phonology, providing a more systematic and rigorous way of analyzing and classifying the sounds of human language.
So the Prague school brought a functionalist lens to structuralism.
Yeah.
Focusing on how language is used for communication and how its structure reflects those communicative goals. What about the third school?
Right.
You mentioned that there were 3 main flavors of structuralism.
And the third one is the Copenhagen school,
Copenhagen.
emerged in Denmark.
Okay.
They took a highly abstract and formal approach to structuralism,
Okay.
almost like mathematicians trying to create a logical model of language.
So they were less interested in the psychological or social aspects of language and more interested in its pure underlying structure.
Yeah.
The rules and principles that govern how it works.
Exactly.
Okay.
Their leading figure was Louis Chomsky,
Okay.
who developed a theory called glossomatics,
Okay.
which aimed to create a universal framework for analyzing language,
Okay.
regardless of its specific sounds, words, or grammatical structures.
It sounds like they were trying to create a kind of linguistic algebra, a set of formulas that could be applied to any language.
That's a great analogy.
Awesome.
Helmsley argued that language is a system of relations, not just a collection of elements.
Okay.
He proposed that language has 2 levels,
Okay.
an expression plane,
Okay.
which is the level of sounds and words,
Right.
and a content plane,
Okay.
which is the level of meaning.
So the expression plane is like the physical form of language.
Yeah.
The sounds we hear and the letters we see, while the content plane is the realm of concepts and ideas that those sounds and words represent.
Precisely. And he argued that these 2 planes are connected by a system of relations, a kind of mental mapping between sound and meaning.
Wow.
He saw language as a network
Okay.
where the value of each element is determined by its position in the network,
Right.
not by some inherent property of the element itself.
It's like saying that the meaning of a word in a sentence is determined not just by its dictionary definition, but also by its relationship to the other words in the sentence and by the overall context of the communication.
Exactly.
Okay.
Helmsley's work was highly abstract and complex, and it sparked a lot of debate among linguists, but it also had a profound influence on the development of linguistic theory,
Okay.
pushing the field towards a more formal and systematic approach to understanding the structure of language.
So we've now journeyed through 3 distinct flavors of structuralism.
Yeah.
The Geneva School, with its focus on the psychological and expressive aspects of language. The Prague School, with its emphasis on function and communication.
Yeah.
And the Copenhagen School, with its abstract and formal approach to language as a system of relations.
And what's remarkable is that all of these schools, despite their differences, shared a common ancestor.
Okay.
Saussure's revolutionary idea that language is a system of signs where meaning arises from relationships, not from inherent connections to the real world.
It's like they were all exploring different rooms in the same house.
Yeah.
Each room offering a unique perspective on the overall architecture of language.
Exactly.
I like that.
And this diversity of perspectives within structuralism is a testament to the richness and complexity of language itself. It's a reminder that there's no single right way to understand language. And that different approaches can offer valuable insights into different aspects of this fascinating phenomenon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But our journey through the schools of linguistics isn't over yet. We've explored the European scene, but across the Atlantic, a different kind of structuralism was taking shape.
It's driven by a more practical need to describe the incredible diversity of indigenous languages in the Americas.
And this American structuralism, with its emphasis on rigorous methodology and data-driven analysis, would have a profound impact on the field, paving the way for new methods and theories that continue to shape how we understand language today.
That sounds like a story for part 2.
Absolutely. Welcome back to our linguistic expedition.
Thanks for having me back.
Before we dive into the American side of the story, I think it's worth pausing to appreciate the tension we've uncovered so far between form and function in language.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a constant tug of war, right?
Yeah.
On one side, we have those who are fascinated by the intricate structures and rules that make language tick like a beautifully crafted clock.
Precisely.
Okay.
And on the other side, we have those who are captivated by how language is used in the real world to convey meaning, to build relationships, and even manipulate others.
Right. It's like seeing language as a versatile tool that can be used for all sorts of purposes.
It reminds me of architecture.
Okay.
You can have a building that's structurally impressive, but if it's not functional, if it doesn't serve the needs of the people who use it, then it's not really successful, is it?
That's a fantastic analogy.
Thanks.
And this tension between form and function played out in different ways across the various schools of linguistic thought we've been exploring.
And if I remember correctly, the Prague school, despite being structuralists, were really interested in that functional side of language, weren't they?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They were masters at bridging the gap between form and function. Remember their work on functional sentence perspective?
Oh, yeah.
They showed how we can rearrange words in a sentence to emphasize different parts of the message, even if the basic information stays the same.
Right. It's like saying the cat sat on the mat versus on the mat sat the cat. The information is identical, but the emphasis shifts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they argued that these choices aren't random. They reflect the speaker's communicative intentions, what they want the listener to focus on.
Yeah.
It's like a director using camera angles and lighting to guide the viewer's attention in a film.
I see.
Yeah.
So they were saying that grammar isn't just a set of arbitrary rules. It's a toolbox for shaping meaning and achieving communicative goals.
Precisely. And their insights into the functional aspects of language were groundbreaking. They also delved into phonology, exploring how sounds contribute to meaning beyond just distinguishing words.
Didn't they point out that stress in English can help signal word boundaries?
Yeah.
Making spoken language easier to understand?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like those subtle pauses and inflections that make all the difference when we're listening to someone speak.
Totally.
And they also recognize the importance of intonation, the melody of our speech, in conveying emotion, attitude, and those subtle shades of meaning that can't always be captured in words alone.
So the Prague School was really ahead of its time in recognizing the interplay between form and function.
Yes.
They show that language is a dynamic tool for communication shaped by the needs of its users.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And their work laid the groundwork for later developments in fields like sociolinguistics and pragmatics, which focus on how language is used in social contexts and how meaning is created in interaction.
Speaking of focusing on how language is used, you mentioned earlier that American structuralism was driven by a more practical need.
Right.
What was the context for its emergence?
Well, imagine encountering a vast array of languages, many undocumented, and completely different from anything you've ever encountered before.
Wow.
That was the situation faced by linguists in the Americas, who were confronted with the incredible diversity of indigenous languages.
So it was like being dropped into a linguistic jungle, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds and structures.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
And out of this need to describe and analyze these diverse languages, American structuralism emerged. They were less concerned with grand theories and more focused on developing rigorous methods for collecting and analyzing language data.
So they were like linguistic explorers, mapping out uncharted territory, creating dictionaries and grammars for languages that had never been written down before.
Precisely.
Wow, it's a big job.
One of the key figures in this movement was Leonard Bloomfield,
Okay.
who advocated for a strictly empirical approach to language study.
Okay.
He believed that linguists should focus on observable data on the actual sounds and utterances produced by speakers and avoid making assumptions about underlying mental processes.
So it was a very data-driven
Right.
approach, kind of
Yeah.
like a scientist conducting experiments to understand the natural world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bloomfield and his followers developed a method called immediate constituent analysis, which involved breaking down sentences into smaller and smaller meaningful units.
Right.
Kind of like dissecting a sentence to see how it's put together.
So it was like taking a sentence apart and figuring out how each piece contributes to the overall meaning.
Uh-huh.
Were there any other influential figures in American structuralism?
Yes.
Okay.
There was Edward Sapir,
Okay.
who was fascinated by the relationship between language, culture, and thought.
Mm-hmm.
He emphasized the importance of understanding the cultural context in which a language is spoken.
Okay.
And he believed that language can shape our perception of the world.
That sounds a bit like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Mm.
The idea that the language we speak influences how we think.
Exactly.
Wow.
Sapir's work was one of the inspirations for that hypothesis, which we'll explore in more detail later.
Okay.
He also mentored Benjamin Lee Whorf, who became famous for his studies of Hopi language and his ideas about linguistic relativity.
So American structuralism, with its emphasis on empirical observation, rigorous methodology, and the description of diverse languages, made a significant contribution to the field, paving the way for new methods and theories.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's worth noting that while American structuralism differed in some ways from the European schools we discussed earlier, they were all ultimately concerned with understanding the structure of language and how it works as a system.
It's like they were all looking at the same mountain from different angles.
Yeah.
Each perspective offering a unique view of the terrain.
Exactly. And this diversity of approaches is what makes linguistics so fascinating. It's a field that's constantly evolving with new discoveries and insights emerging all the time.
Speaking of new discoveries and insights, I can't help but notice that we've been talking a lot about structure.
Yeah.
About the rules and patterns of language. But what about the purpose of language?
Right.
How does its structure actually serve its function?
That's a great question. And it brings us to another important school of thought, functionalism. Okay.
Functionalists argue that the structure of language isn't arbitrary. It's shaped by the communicative work it needs to do, by the messages it needs to convey, and by the social goals it helps us achieve.
So it's like saying that the shape of a hammer is determined by its function, which is to drive nails. That form follows the function.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while we've already touched on the functionalist tendencies of the Prague school, functionalism as a distinct school of thought emerged in the mid-20th century with linguists like Simon Dick and Talmy Givon pushing for a more holistic understanding of language.
So instead of just focusing on the formal properties of language, like sounds, words, and grammar, they were interested in how language is actually used to do things in the world, to communicate ideas, to build relationships, to influence others.
Precisely.
Okay.
They argued that to truly understand language, we need to consider its function, its purpose, its role in human interaction.
They were interested in questions like, how do we use language to convey information efficiently? How do we use language to establish social connections? How do we use language to persuade or manipulate others?
It sounds like functionalism brought a more pragmatic perspective to the study of language. Recognizing that language isn't just an abstract system. It's a tool that we use to achieve real-world goals.
Exactly. And functionalists developed new methods and theories to analyze language from this perspective, focusing on things like information structure, discourse analysis, and the role of context in shaping meaning.
So they were looking at language in action, observing how it's used in different situations and for different purposes. It's like studying the behavior of animals in their natural habitat rather than just observing them in a zoo.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And functionalism challenged some of the core assumptions of structuralism, arguing that language can't be fully understood without considering its function and its role in human communication.
It's like saying that you can't fully understand a car by just looking at its engine. You need to see it driving down the road to really appreciate what it's capable of.
Exactly. And this debate between structuralism and functionalism has been a fruitful one, leading to new insights and a more nuanced understanding of the complex nature of language.
But our linguistic journey isn't over yet. We've explored the historical roots of linguistics, the emergence of structuralism, and the rise of functionalism. But I have a feeling there's another major turning point just around the corner, a school of thought that would shake things up and challenge some of the fundamental assumptions about language.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
And that brings us to the revolutionary ideas of Noam Chomsky and the emergence of generative grammar. Which would redefine the field of linguistics and spark decades of debate and research.
This sounds like a good place to pause for now.
Yeah.
I'm already feeling my brain buzzing with all these new ideas and perspectives.
I agree. Let's continue our exploration of the linguistic landscape in part 3.
Okay.
where we'll delve into the mind-blowing world of generative grammar and its impact on how we understand language today.
Welcome back to our deep dive into linguistics.
Yeah.
We've journeyed through centuries of thought, from the historical detectives to the structural architects and even the language pragmatists.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling things are about to get really mind-bending as we enter the era of generative grammar and the ideas of Noam Chomsky.
You're absolutely right. Chomsky's work was like a seismic shift in linguistics.
Wow.
It's not just that he proposed new theories, he changed the very questions we ask about language.
Okay, I'm all ears. What was so revolutionary about Chomsky's approach?
Well, before Chomsky, most linguists were focused on describing the structure of language as it exists.
Okay.
Analyzing sounds, words, and grammar as you'd find them in a dictionary or a textbook.
Yeah.
But Chomsky asked a more fundamental question.
Okay.
How do humans acquire language in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
How do we go from being helpless babies to fluent speakers capable of producing and understanding an infinite number of sentences?
That is a big question.
Yeah.
And it seems like a pretty obvious one, but it sounds like it wasn't really at the forefront of linguistic research before Chomsky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chomsky argued that children couldn't possibly learn language just through imitation and reinforcement, as behaviorists at the time suggested.
Okay.
The language we encounter in our environment is too messy, too incomplete to account for the complexity and creativity of human language.
So he was basically saying that there's something more going on, something deeper than just mimicking what we hear around us.
Precisely.
Okay.
Chomsky proposed that humans are born with an innate capacity for language, a kind of mental blueprint that he called the language faculty.
Right.
This faculty isn't a specific language like English or Mandarin, but rather a set of universal principles that underlie all human languages.
So it's like we're pre-wired for language with a basic operating system that allows us to learn any language we're exposed to.
That's a great analogy.
I like that. And this innate language faculty, according to Chomsky, contains a set of abstract rules and structures that allow us to generate an infinite number of grammatically correct sentences from a finite set of words.
Wow.
This is why it's called generative grammar.
So it's like we have this internal grammar machine that allows us to combine words and phrases in endless ways, creating new sentences we've never heard before.
Exactly.
Cool.
And Chomsky argued that this ability to generate novel sentences is proof that language isn't just a learned behavior. It's a reflection of the deep structure of the human mind.
This is where things start to get mind-blowing for me. So instead of just describing the surface features of language, Chomsky was trying to uncover the hidden mechanisms that make language possible.
Exactly.
He shifted the focus from language as a product of culture to language as a product of biology, of our shared human nature.
It's like he was saying that language isn't just something we learn, it's something we're born with, a part of what makes us human.
Precisely.
Wow.
And this idea had massive implications for how we understand language acquisition, language change, and even the relationship between language and thought.
I can see how this would be revolutionary.
Yeah.
So how did other linguists react to Chomsky's ideas?
Well,
did everyone embrace this new paradigm?
Not quite. Chomsky's work was incredibly influential.
Yeah.
But it also sparked a lot of debate and controversy. Some linguists embraced his ideas wholeheartedly, while others challenged his assumptions and proposed alternative theories.
So it was like a linguistic earthquake, shaking up the field and creating new fault lines of debate.
Exactly. One of the key points of contention was Chomsky's emphasis on universal grammar. Some linguists argued that his search for universals was too abstract, that it ignored the incredible diversity of human languages and the role of culture in shaping language.
Right. It's like arguing that all buildings are basically the same because they all have walls and a roof, ignoring the vast differences in architectural styles and cultural influences.
That's a great point.
Thanks.
And there were also debates about the nature of the language faculty itself.
Okay.
Some linguists argued that it was too powerful, too specific to language, while others argued that it was more general, a reflection of broader cognitive abilities that humans possess.
So even within the camp of generative grammar, there were different schools of thought, different interpretations of Chomsky's core ideas.
Absolutely. And these debates have been incredibly fruitful, leading to new research, new theories, and a deeper understanding of the complexities of language.
So generative grammar wasn't just a single theory. It was a paradigm shift that opened up new avenues of inquiry and transformed the field of linguistics.
Exactly. And Chomsky's ideas continue to influence linguistic research today, even though many linguists have moved beyond his original formulations.
It's like he laid down the foundation and then others built upon it.
Yeah.
Creating new wings and extensions to the house of linguistics.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks.
And this ongoing evolution of linguistic thought is a testament to the dynamism and intellectual vibrancy of the field. It's a field that's constantly questioning, exploring, and pushing the boundaries of our understanding of language.
So we've journeyed through the major schools of linguistics, from the historical roots to the structural frameworks, the functional perspectives, and the mind-bending world of generative grammar.
It has indeed been quite a ride.
And as we wrap up our deep dive, I think it's worth reflecting on how these different schools, despite their differences and debates, have all contributed to a richer and more nuanced understanding of this incredible faculty that we call language.
Absolutely. They've each provided a different lens through which to view this complex and fascinating phenomenon. Exactly.
Yeah.
And while there's still much we don't know about language, the insights we've gained from these schools have illuminated the path forward, guiding us toward a deeper appreciation of the power, beauty, and mystery of human language.
Help our efforts. Like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future videos.